So it is my pleasure to introduce today four wonderful guests. So next to me will be Jeremy Bergstein, and he is the co-founder of the Science Project. And he's created, along with his company, really interesting projects for Uniqlo, Nike, Kate Spade, and he has lots to share with us today. And then I believe it's Laura, wonderful. Laura Heller is a journalist who covers the changes in the retail sector for a number of publications, including Forbes. And she'll be sharing a lot with us about how wearables and also modern retail is being impacted by technology. And I'm delighted that I finally personally had a chance to meet Anne-Marie Stephen, a futurist who has a firm called Kwolia, and she spends a lot of time with tech companies, a lot of time with retail companies, and she'll be talking to us about what we can expect going forward. And last but certainly not least, an old friend of mine, Andy Hobsbawm, who is the co-founder of EVRYTHNG, and he has an IoT company that's really touching all sorts of products, from consumer packaged goods all the way to apparel, and he'll be sharing a lot about how IoT will be impacting both the fashion and the retail sectors. So thank you all so much. First of all, I think it's been a really interesting morning, and I've really appreciated particularly the companies that have been talking about, you know, not just all of the fascinating products that are being created, but also the challenges. You know, when we start talking about the challenges between design and technology, and the challenges of really consumer behavior and how you know, we all need to adapt to still, you know, charging our watches, or what are the various use cases for the technology. You know, really appreciate that we have the chance now with our panel to sort of bring home what's been talked about today, and always focusing on the consumer. And I'd actually like to start with you, Laura, first. Oh. And because when I certainly haven't read it all, but when I see the work that you're doing and you're reporting on Amazon, the things that you're talking about in terms of Macy's, and this is moving away a little bit from the wearables conversation, but it is looking at the modern retail conversation. Can you talk a little bit about and connect the dots for us on new technology, you know, how data is being used, how some of the other new technologies, what are some of the best ones that are being integrated? What is Amazon, for example, doing really well? And what are some of the things that some of the other retailers like Macy's might need to improve on?
Well,
it's a lot. It's a big question.
That's a whole session in and of itself. I think that there's two conversations happening around wearables amongst retailers. And one is as a product category, how do we sell it and merchandise it and capitalize on this popularity? And the other is, how do we use wearable technology as a business to better connect with our customers, how to retrieve information and develop products and new services and programs around that information. And those are two distinct things, but they all center around the same item, which is the wearable. And you know, we have Amazon, which is killing it with Alexa and artificial intelligence, and integrating that into wearables, into smart home devices, and connecting and making this web of their own that they are then using to grow their Prime membership and services offered to them. And then we have Macy's, which is using it as a product category and selling it in watches and as a fashion item. And then there's a breadth of people in between. And the legacy retailers like Macy's are struggling to add wearables to their infrastructure and get their shoppers to adopt it and to opt in, and then they're being crushed by the amount of data that they're getting and not necessarily sure how to use it. Some are doing better than others. And I don't know if that answers your question, but that's a real kind of big picture response. The most exciting to retailers is really the least sexy It's the being able to put sensors into products and track those products throughout their supply chain and know where everything is so that they can actually deliver on their promises of omni-channel fulfillment, which is where shoppers go online, they select an item, they choose in-store pickup or ship to home or ship from store, which is what big retailers want to offer. And in order to ship a product from the store, you have to know where the product is within the store. And for any of you who's ever shopped, you know you might pick up something, put it back somewhere. So now that sweatshirt that you thought you needed, maybe because you have to buy your kid something, you decided, no, I'm not going to buy that now. You put that back in the children's department, and somebody orders it online. It shows up as being in the store, but nobody knows where it is. So being able to track that and use
Does that
sensors.
happen? Does that happen?
It does happen.
It's a big shock, right? So those are things that, I mean, it's such a small thing, but it's a big problem. And wearables have the promise to help solve that problem. And that's what I think developers really should be focused on from my perspective.
No, that's really interesting. And I think, Andy, it's a perfect sort of segue into picking up on what EVRYTHNG does. If you could briefly tell us a little bit about EVRYTHNG, and particularly, I know you have a really good example there of a new product that you've been working on. But what I think all of us are most interested in, where Laura was really taking this, is really there are two sides of IoT in what we wear. Mm-hmm. One side is for the manufacturer, and I think it's tracking where it is in the process, but also the ability to develop maybe less and being able to improve their margins on more if they have a supply chain that's really sort of connected well to them, and if this new technology can enable them to be faster to manufacture, but maybe have to produce less. And then I guess on the consumer side, what kind of information can actually be available. So can you talk to us about the IoT of what EVRYTHNG is doing?
So the reason that we started EVRYTHNG as a company is because of the kinds of things we're talking about, because the idea is really that as things get connected, physical things, be they wearable, bracelets, devices, physical items, products, a huge amount of new data starts flying around. And that data is, in a sense, where increasingly the value lies. How you capture that data, how it's generated, how you turn that into analytics and applications that do useful things, that unlock value for businesses, such as where is my stuff? Is it in stock? Is it being traded out of region? Loss prevention in retail, I think it's like $11 billion a year are lost with people just taking stuff back, going, oh, I bought it here, but I haven't got a receipt. So if the products start capturing that data and being able to be asked, were you bought here or were you not, you solve all of these specific use cases and business problems. But to do that, you need a rather sort of clever amount of orchestration or choreography of that data in the cloud to make all of those applications and analytics and use cases happen. So that's what EVRYTHNG does. It's sort of, we were talking earlier, I feel like you sort of go back to the Jurassic era of the web, so I've sort of seen the cycle before. And content management systems got invented because suddenly there were tons of content, because everything was digital. Customer relationship management systems in the cloud were there because there was this explosion of customer touch points. So our view is product data from things is a thing, and it needs to be managed, and there needs to be a data management system to do that. And what's fascinating once you do that is you can run so many different applications and get so much value from it. So you can think a bit about being able to ask products questions. So you can literally say, are you in stock? Are you in this store? Where are you? Actually interrogate the products and have them deliver back useful experiences to consumers. So this is an example of something we partnered with Avery Dennison on the labels and tags, and this is a New York designer, Rochambeau. We partnered with a retailer called The Newsstand in New York. And it's effectively a product that comes with a layer of experiences around it. So in a kind of quite an interesting design solve, there's a little label here which has a unique QR code and an NFC tag. It hides in the pocket. You tap your NFC phone on the sleeve or you scan the code. And it talks to the cloud and it delivers experiences and it turns the jacket into a passport. So it will literally get you into the front of a club, regardless of how long the line is. It will get you the best seat in a restaurant. It will get you a free gift if you walk into the retail outlets. And there's something, I think, quite magical about objects with intelligence. And we often think about it as if these objects had a digital life, what would they do? And somehow they could bring to life their reason for existence, give the consumer a better experience of them, and give the retailers and the brands all the data and information about where they are and what state they're in, which then solves their problems and creates a whole load of value.
So, Anne-Marie, we've been talking, as a futurist, we were just talking a lot about data and how some of us feel about the future of data and the future of where our data will live. How do you see this in the future? And will smart technology proliferate all garments? Will it be elsewhere? And how will retailers and consumers interact in that way?
Okay, this will be a very quick answer. No. You know, it's such an exciting and interesting time, right? So in that question, and we've already heard it a couple times, is basically the two pieces that we're thinking about is the business side supply chain, which has been somewhat overlooked, I think, in sort of the tech experience, right? Because that part, because that serves the customer experience, which is the other piece of this, right? So keeping that consumer at the center of it. And when you keep the consumer at the center of it, you need the inventory to support that. Tracking devices on garments certainly are a significant opportunity for retailers to deliver not only an amazing customer experience, because you know where the garment is, you know the place and time where it's at, you know from an overall inventory carry, you know, retailers are certainly challenged in reducing cost, right, and generating profit. So if you can get your inventory in the right place, in the right time, and to move it, and the link to that being delivering an amazing customer experience, you're a winner, right? Easier said than done. I mean, harder than, right? Easier said than done. Yeah. I clearly need more coffee. So data will have a significant impact, but we're not there yet, right? Companies like Andy's are important because we do need those connectivity pieces to bring the data together. I always say, I love data because data tells stories, right? And data is, I'm oversimplifying it, an idiot's guide to what's going on, right? But you have to be able to understand what the story is telling you, what the data is telling you, and what the story is in that information. So when we're talking about wearables, for example, or phones and devices, I think one significant piece around consumer experience and mirroring supply chain is location data. So location-based information is not only serving us in a marketing opportunity, right, that you can market directly, and that's happening right now, you know, certainly with different technologies that can deliver information to your phone, but also that'll be integrated into the wearable devices, whatever that would be. And also whether it's a sensor you're wearing on your body, where do these consumers flow, right? Or in additionally delivering information to your wearable. So now, one of the pieces we talked about, and I'll touch on this, is you know, do people want to give up their data, right? Right now, it's a free, open faucet of, you know, just data and information being collected. How much of it is utilized, I think, is really that's another question, right? Because it's all in development. You know, once a retailer gets a hold of this, you know, they may be collecting the data, but they don't necessarily have a tool or the opportunity or the resources yet to funnel that out and understand what all that means and where the impact is. So that's one piece of it, and that's certainly happening. And I did have, I'm not certain I can say it, so I'm just going to be very kind of broad. So I recently sat with a big apparel company, sports apparel company, is very leading edge company in the sportswear kind of category, and they are, I sat with the head of Omnichannel, and we talked about the data collection, and they've said publicly that their company is really a data company. That's how they see themselves. Now, when you're looking at apparel, which was how they were founded as a company, and now you're using that as more of a tool to collect information, that's a very different proposition. So they're really not a product and fashion company anymore. They're a data company. Now, what he also said is we haven't figured it all out yet. So they're in the piece of figuring out how to connect omni-channel. So the things we're talking about in the future are where Andy's going with this and where we're all going with this, I think, is that we can marry supply chain to a customer experience ultimately, right? And help these customers, help the companies survive and grow and thrive, but that will be driven by great tools and management systems that allow us to do that. And to be honest, we're really far apart, you know? And then the next piece of that, that's a B2B side. On the B2B side, not only is it consumer experience, we are significantly far away from consumers on adoption on this piece. And that's gonna be a huge piece of what needs to happen is the consumer needs to be educated. And I love talking about all the geektastic stuff that we come to Las Vegas to talk about, but the true fact of the matter is the consumers are pretty far away from where we are. And yeah, so I'll leave it there.
And I just want to throw in, it's an interesting point about how retailers view themselves or a brand views themselves, because there have been times in history where Walmart was describing itself as a fulfillment company. They were logistics and fulfillment.
So interesting.
Because they built systems that they could move product across this country and around the world in a way that nobody else could. Now, is Amazon a retailer? Is it a technology company? Is it a fulfillment company? Is it a platform? It's all of those things. And wearables play into that, and the sensors and all the technology that we talk about at this show and in this room are facilitating these different incarnations of major brands that we all interact with every day.
I think that's, really interesting. And, when we talk about putting the consumer in the center of the conversation, I mean, that's a practice that brands and retailers are really focusing on right now. But I still wonder, and I think all of us really wonder, well, how do we feel about that? What do we really need and what do we really want? So, Jeremy, what I think is so interesting about the science project is the way you bring together technology and creativity. And I really do think that with Kate Spade and certainly with Uniqlo, that you are responding to the consumer in really interesting ways. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about how you think about consumers, how you help your clients think about consumers, and how that marriage of creativity and technology does really come to life. And I'm not sure it's in a wearable context as much as it is in a modern retail context.
Sure, I mean, there's no better place to talk about this than CES, at a place where there's just so much firepower on these show floors and just such incredible technology. And we really have to look at it through a whole different lens. We have to take a look at that and think about the applications of that technology, and really think about those customer behaviors and whether they're actually going to use it. Often we're overshooting with the amount of horsepower that we can give to these customers. The same way Anne-Marie was saying, I mean, customers are simply not ready for most of this technology at its sort of full volume. So we really take a look at the customer, and then we also take a look at the brand, what's appropriate. And we work with a lot of fancy fashion brands. We're not really that fancy ourselves, but they are very discerning. You have to take a look at what types of technology you're going to bring into their ecosystem, and you can't introduce anything that's extraneous, that could be seen as sort of novel. So we really try to take a look at what the technology is, what that interactive behavior is. And I don't mean interactive in the way that digital's kind of screwed up the word. I mean interactive in the way that we're interacting right now. So we have to take a look at what those tools are that support that. And we really will take a look at IoT and say, is this appropriate to solve the behavior for the customer? Is it a match for the brand? And those are the things, that we kind of look at. And then we also have to look at the technology infrastructure. I mean, getting back to what these guys were saying on stage, that was just so interesting before, working with the next generation of retailers, you can really see their heart and soul, which you were getting at. Amazon's heart and soul as a technology company, and Macy's heart and soul as this cooperative multi-brand retailer. We'll take a look at companies as a consultancy that have been born out of catalogs. They're experts at direct. They have incredible CRM systems, and they have problems with opening stores. Or there'll be e-com first companies that were born out of their e-commerce system and a middling CRM system. They don't know how to open a store. And then we'll take a look at, store first companies, or companies that have licensed themselves. I mean, you know this better than anybody, who have gone and created these massive, amazing brands and have licensed themselves. How can they change their behavior to own the data, own that relationship with the customer? So we're going to take a look, at the real heart and soul of the company, take a look at that data infrastructure, the customer, the brand, and then we take a look at the technology and see if it's appropriate to fulfill that behavior. So that's how we design.
I'm so glad you said that, because the technology is an enabler, right? So I do the same thing. I ask, when I work with people, they want to talk about, I don't know, beacons. We'll just pick on beacons. I like to pick on beacons.
It's an easy one to pick on.
It's easy, because it's an easy pick. But, I say, okay, that's great. You want to do this. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? What is it that we want to do, Because they are just enablers, and we have to be strategic and thoughtful about what do we want to do and what fits and what makes sense. And innovation, is an interesting word, because it is truly iterative, and I think that's the other thing is we have to get away from, and I think we're seeing some of it, but what the realities are for today, if you're going to survive tomorrow, you have to be, it's a completely different landscape. The playbook that was used for the last 50 years in retail and brands is off the table. It is completely not indicative of what the future is going to be. So risk is inherent in what needs to happen, right? Even taking small bites at the apple, whatever those things are, it's the fail fast, philosophy, but that has to happen for retailers and brands, and they have to take those risks. The challenge is that we were talking earlier, retailers are very concerned about what's happening today, right? So that's not going to necessarily lead to success in the future, which I understand there are challenges and pressures in driving revenue today, keeping the doors open, but we're really stuck in a really challenging time of being concerned about what's happening close to the vest, and then also looking in the long term. But that requires risk, and it requires investment. So when we talk about wearable solutions, connecting the dots, AI, the risk has to be, you have to take a calculated risk on investing. I work with a very large technology company that has a powerful AI solution. I said, we have to tell a story about how to teach retailers and brands to eliminate the risk, teach them and make it less risk averse. But there's an education around those pieces, because it's critical to the future. The second piece I will say is the creativity piece that has to go along with this. When I say the playbook is gone, our brand, I tell you, what does your brand really mean? What does your brand really mean? Because now it isn't just going to exist how you see it today, and it's shifting and changing in a physical presence. For pure play e-commerce, right, for an Amazon that just opened their store of the future, right, which is basically, I'm sure many people in this room saw it, it's a frictionless experience. You just go into the physical space, take the products that you want, and then put them in your bag, and you never see a cashier, you never, it's a very, very much a self-service environment. Well, that's where wearables can play into that. So that's a pure play e-com coming into a physical space, and then the physical going into the digital. So that really means, what is Amazon, right?
Well, Amazon has a luxury of doing something that none of the other established retailers or large brands do. Amazon has been allowed to innovate without producing revenue from it. And nobody else has been given that luxury as a publicly traded company. So not only do you have the short-term pressure of we need to produce profits this quarter or this month, but we are legally responsible to our shareholders to do something quarter by quarter by quarter by quarter. So it makes it very difficult to have that long view and to innovate and to risk and to fail fast. And retailers are being told time and again now, every retail-specific conference that I go to, think like a startup, innovate, fail fast, but they don't really have that luxury. Amazon has always been given a pass on that, and so they get to do things like create Amazon Go.
No, I agree with that. But additionally, though, they've recreated who they are, right? So I would say, from a branding perspective, I'd pick on New York Times as a great example, right? For me, just go completely outside of the retail world. But the New York Times or journalism, when we saw everything go digital in that world, it's almost like it happened so fast they didn't know it was coming, they didn't know it hit them, and they had to change everything about who they are. So New York Times, their slogan is, all the news that's fit to print. But the New York Times now has to tell a different story or add to that saying, we are the best storytellers in the world. And we're going to do that by introducing you to, one way they started was to give Google Cardboard in every Sunday newspaper to every subscriber across the United States. So then you put that on, you see a story about what's happening in a Vietnamese rice paddy in Thailand. It takes you into that information, right? So now they become associated with being the best storytellers in the world, or at least that's there. So from a brand perspective, what does that mean, right?
I think there's a couple of interesting thoughts because again, going back to sort of the start of the web and stuff, I mean, the technology's been creating blur, since the beginning, because one of the things it does is it redefines what things are, what the competency of a company is, what they should have in-house versus outsource and so on. And you're just seeing that accelerate right now. And I think to bring it back to wearables and retail, there's a very interesting question about what is a shop these days? Because if the products and the physical objects around us and the devices that we wear are connected to the network, they are interfaces to information and services. So if you look at what, say, Disney's doing with Magic Band, that is effectively a shop, an interface to a shop that you carry around that facilitates your commerce experience and your service experience. So I think that companies are struggling or scrambling perhaps to rethink what their core competence and purpose is, but also how they engage with customers and what points. The omnichannel challenge is that everything connects to everything else. So how do you sequence that and choreograph it in a way that's a good experience as well as very profitable? Because now anything can, in theory, connect to anything else. The other point that it brings in with the Amazon factor I think is very interesting is a lot of brands, it feels to me, are seriously asleep at the wheel. Because if Amazon is actively eating their lunch in front of them, it's actually sort of picking sort of stuff off their plate and sort of smiling while it eats them. And they're, so I don't quite understand why brands aren't realizing that Amazon is relentlessly networking data about its customers. It's getting more and more personalized. It's then selling things more and more efficiently. It then launches its own brand products. So now it's got the second largest apparel retailer. It's launching CPG. And if you are making a product yourself and you're not deciding that that needs to be a serious critical asset digitally for you, you're going to let someone like Amazon, who I have enormous respect for, obviously, with an Echo device, disintermediate you and your customer. Because in the future, a customer's definition of a soap powder brand may not be what Procter & Gamble or Unilever wants to sell them. It'll be what Alexa tells them. So these digital interfaces that can come between the company and their brand and their customers, people are doing this. Facebook, Snapchat, all of these companies are grabbing the data, grabbing the customer relationships. So I think that's the real question for brands with wearables, with data, with connectivity. How do you go to market in a way that connects to your customers directly and choreographs all of your assets in a way that adds value on your terms and delivers on the promise of your brand? Otherwise, other people will do it for you.
Right.
Just a couple follow, and not to bring the conversation down too much to real world stuff of today, but Laura, when do the analysts stop evaluating the success of a retailer on sales per square foot? Like, at what point?
You got me. I don't think they legally can. I think that there are SEC regulations and things that are put into effect. Retailers have tried for years. They've stopped reporting. They used to report monthly sales.
Right.
That ended, and it was quarterly. They've tried to get away from that, but there's only so far they can get with that. It's tough to be a visionary when you're not allowed to see far.
Yes.
And we're watching them die off. Nobody likes change. That's human behavior. And so even a company is just a larger extension of that behavior.
Yes.
Yes.
And the new breed of companies that are coming up are doing really well at certain aspects of it. But as Jeremy said, they can't open a store, and they don't understand how to run the store.
Yes.
And that you go to the store, you've gone out of your way now to go to the Bonobos showroom and see it, but you're not allowed to take anything home with you. And so the real beauty of a store and that immediate gratification is then missing. And so why go back?
I mean, I'll just say I speak quite often and have ruffled quite a few feathers at some real estate and retail conventions around I think the square foot is broken. I mean, it's like a complete sickness in that, in that industry. Your demarcation of value is, I presented actually an equation at the ICSC, which is International Shopping Center Conference, the new metric of value for retail and real estate. Journeys don't start at the lease line. They don't end at the checkout counter. People are introduced to a brand in one place, they fall in love with a product in another, and they buy in yet another. How are these guys supposed to measure their value? And yet, people like Macy's or the shopping malls, who are doing actually quite a nice job at changing and adapting over here, but they sell square footage.
Yes.
I mean,
but at
sell
the
square
same
footage,
time, these CEOs are paid to deliver shareholder value that's measured against metrics that are perhaps some of the most antiquated of this whole conversation.
Well, I recently ruffled some feathers with the retail association, and I said, they said, well, we're just having, a chat, and it's like, well, how many retailers do you know these CEOs and do you know all these people? And I said, well, yeah, but I think you're asking me the wrong question. The question is, who's going to be your retailer of the future?
Yes.
Because the companies you're talking about today, because if you're not investing today in some of these things, they will not exist in 10 years. It's not going to happen, and there are reports on this. There's information, in the Fortune 100 type things. So Macy's will probably be one of them, unless they innovate very quickly and lease inside the store. But that's a different conversation. Because when you talk about what the future looks like, so retail's non-traditional, the playbook's gone. So it's around collaboration, creativity, passbooks. How do I have true utility in creating a relationship? The relationship is different. It's not the product. So when I'm talking about a sportswear company that sees themselves as a data company, that's a big deal. They don't see themselves as delivering that product. They see themselves in a technology perspective, essentially. So if you're looking at I think Qualcomm did an announcement this week that they're going to be doing some wearable technologies, they're developing wearable technologies, and they're doing a partnership with United Healthcare. This is what I think is the future, right? Is that those relationships that we thought existed or retail existed today is very different. So when they do this partnership with United Healthcare, there's some utility in saying, when I count your steps, if you do 10,000 steps a day, at the end of the year, you get your deductible completely paid off, right? We will refund you that or rebate you. You're starting to create a relationship with that consumer. So I had Laura actually ask me this recently, just on creating relationships. That's what these technologies do. So who can you collaborate with that feeds into that relationship? How do you deliver utility using these technologies? Is a real true utility. I saw the LG booth, if anybody hasn't gone there yet, go, because they've used robots, AI, they've completed, have a complete suite of data and tools that are connected together in a connected experience that have true utility within the home, as told through the story of technology and data, right? That connect your robotic lawnmower, your robotic, your refrigerator, it was just like, I can't even remember everything, but the lawnmower, the vacuum cleaner, all those things. But the point being is that it was all connected and served utility. And part of that is too with consumers is helping them understand and tell the story. And I thought they did an excellent job just watching the video and having it all kind of connected together. It was simple and easy to understand.
And there's a piece that we haven't touched on yet, which is the store employee.
Yes.
Or even if it's an online retailer, the customer service agent. So with wearables, there's opportunities to put them in a garment, to put it on your wrist, to get the data back, to track the product. But the link between the company that's selling it to you, the brand or the retailer, and the end user is a salesperson ultimately. Whether it's the blurb you put online or the discussion you have in the store, and often that's a huge missing link. So when you're developing the wearables, when you're putting them into market, when you're creating solutions for retailers or brands, think about how that middleman is going to understand it and communicate it to the end user. Because oftentimes we're giving them tools at store level with tablets, with SMS, text messaging programs between them and a customer that the employees don't want to use. They haven't been trained on it, they haven't been incentivized, there's nothing in it for them, it's just more work, and it's annoying. Sometimes it's something that is loud, is work intensive. They break it on purpose so they don't have to use it.
That doesn't happen either.
I said that out loud.
It happens.
You know, there's great stories about home appliance retailers that had some interactive products that, you know, in videos that the brands had made and installed and put in, you know, displays in the store to help communicate this, but it spoke, and it spoke over and over and over and over and over and over and over. You get the idea, right? The people in that department were out of their minds, and that suddenly stopped working.
And to your earlier point as well, one of the things that I think connectivity is doing and Internet of Things and stuff is effectively instrumenting the planet. So everything now can be visualized as data and analyzed. So even on a basic level, if a shop staff person is looking for that coat that should have been in the inventory that wasn't, or they're having to check the expiration dates of food or do markdowns, all of those things take them away from customers. So if the technology can just at a sort of utility level simply facilitate a more effective organization and service delivery of the product itself in the right state, in the right place at the right time, it then frees up this kind of human capital to do what humans still, thankfully, and for a while, I think do a lot better than machines, which is empathy and kind of forming relationships and connecting on a human level, which seems to me the whole point of a store, because otherwise they really aren't. If you're not experiencing something in a store you can't get through a digital interface, then it really has increasingly diminishing purpose.
I think that's really important, and not to go too far off topic here, but when we do think about the employee, and we do think about everything from Alexa to, you know, robots delivering our product to drones, you know, what happens to the human element of retail? And who that you know, that any of you know of, is really thinking about how to train, educate, and bring that employee into the fold, maybe to also reinvent his or her role in terms of empathy and in terms of engagement. Laura, Jeremy, any of you know of anybody thinking this way?
Every single one of them are thinking about it. From Bonobos, who has got, literally they're wearing their, you know, underwear on the outside. You walk on into their store and they're like,
We're going to get to that.
I have a picture.
and they ask you, have you been here before? If you have, they authenticate you into the system, and you now have a personalized experience. They've got your purchase history, they've got your preferences, you're now a personalized. If you haven't been in, welcome to Bonobos. You know, we have got, this is how the store works. You're going to pick out, we're going to measure you, you're going to look at fabrics. You don't walk out with any of the clothing. Their service model literally reflects an e-commerce onboarding, you know, in a physical setting.
And if I wanted to take my husband's suit out with me, could I? I could not.
They don't have it there. Yeah, they've got these small 1,200 square foot guide shops, and they're guide shops, and they've selected an associate interactive experience that suits the brand, and you know, I think that we'll go and work with almost every single one of our clients. When we create experiences, we're also thinking about the store operation, the associate and training model. And it's one of the most interesting places to work, because that really, the strongest interaction oftentimes is that person-to-person interaction. And it also requires the most like careful touch, especially in like luxury and apparel, where you know, there's just real heavy emotions at play sometimes.
Yeah, and we also think about the fear associated with adapting to new technology and needing to adapt to that technology when it's something you don't understand. And historically, people don't ask questions about things they don't understand. So we have to really think about how to reinvent and create a setting where they're comfortable in learning about these technologies, or else they will sabotage them.
Yeah.
Well, people actually also don't ask questions about things they do understand, and that's
Interesting.
It's a million years ago. The founder of Best Buy told me, when we still had mobile phones, not cordless phones. I had forgotten what they're even called, right? Cordless phones, landlines in the home, and as they were dwindling that department down, they discovered that that was an area they could put someplace that was totally self-service. Customers were insulted if you asked them if they needed help in that area. They don't want you, stay away, this is a phone, I don't need you. So there's a really weird balance there, depending on the life cycle of the technology. And bear in mind, back to the employees, as you're bringing out wearables, oftentimes the employee is less interested in technology than the end user is.
That's right.
So they're in that job because they like interacting with people, they like being out, they like being walking around, they like being in the store environment. They don't want to be in the technology. Maybe the buyer does more than they do. So you still have to make it so they can sell it, so they want to interact with it enough to pass it along.
And that is one of the challenges when you think about wearables in the current retail environments that we're in, not just the newly invented retail environments, but the current ones. You know, they have to stay charged. Somebody does still have to mostly walk them through, while there are many display devices that walk people through. Do any of you have some really good examples of retail environments where wearables are sold very well and where there is that interactivity? Or are we not there yet?
I think AT&T,
I was going to say the same thing.
a lifestyle store.
Yeah, and so in Chicago, there's, because this also ties to the experience piece too. So I've had two, it's really interesting. Chicago seems to be a great test market for experience stores.
Yeah.
You know, the good Midwestern nature of it, I guess. But on Michigan Avenue, they have an experience store, and I was recently there and had an experience, and it was fantastic. And I, of course, ask way too many questions that start to annoy these associates, but they're very helpful. And my questions are things like, do you have a sales goal? Because I was an hour into my experience, and it was great, you know? And
So
I had to
interesting.
download my data, my phone went nuts and all this stuff. So, of course, I didn't have it backed up. Judge me later. But the point being, they were patient, they were accommodating. I could go online initially, make my appointment, show up for my appointment time, go in, and it's a wide space, it's beautiful, it's open, it's modern, it's comfortable, warm lighting, so they've really thought about all of that. And then they also, so I asked, do you have a sales goal? Because I'm wondering, why am I sitting here so long? Why is she patiently going through every detail of my plan and answering all my questions very thoroughly? And then she offered, and I wish I had my phone here, a design, they have a stylist for your phone. So would you like a case for your phone? Well, yes, I'm going to get a case for my phone. We have a case stylist, you know. This is Ahmed, and he will in, you know, a luxury apparel store to outfit my phone, and here are some good selections with that, right? So the experience was, and now here I am in front of all of you sharing what a great experience I had, right? And that is a connection to a brand, right? So when you talk about a wearable and selling wearables and tying that piece in is, how does that connect me to you? So now that I've had this physical experience, engaged in, I understand who you are and what you're about, and that you care about me, I'm now more receptive to what's happening here.
But let's not forget, you're talking about a utility company.
I
that's
am.
Now, that
And
you're
do you know
using
who
as an
else?
example
Yeah.
for an excellent experience.
It
and-
was an excellent
I mean-
experience, and you're going to drop when I tell you this one. The next one, then a couple days later, so I'm doing a relocation. I'm going cable free. So I returned a cable box, right, to Comcast. Get ready. They have the only experience store in the country in Chicago. So I go there, do the same thing, make an appointment, walk in. I'm like, where am I? This place is amazing. And I start grilling them about what are they doing here. And they are, like TNT, hosting community events. They have a beautiful space. It's inviting. There's no sales goal. Nobody sold me. And I'm going to blow you away one more time, is that I said, can you take me through my plan? I want to eliminate some things here. I want to make some changes. Great, no problem. Doop, doop, doop. Hey, do you know about this product? No, I'd take a look at that product. That's great. And actually what they had done, this is the marrying and the collaboration pieces, which isn't wholly unique, but because of these events, so they'll have, they want to be part of the fabric of the community, just a nice place for you to go and host events and do things. So they'll have celebrities and athletes and things like that. They had hosted an event party for Sing, the movie Sing that's out right now because they're partnered with Universal, right?
Yeah.
I walk in, do you remember the movie Big, and they have the piano keyboard that's on the floor, and Tom Hanks dances on this toy, and it plays music when you dance on it. They had one of those in there for Sing. I said, wow. I have nephews that are turning 2 in a couple weeks. I said, I'd like to buy one of those. And they said, we don't sell that. We had this party and we promoted Sing. I said, that's great. Well, could I have it? And you know what they said? Yes. So that became a birthday present for my twin nephews that are 2 years old. And now, where am I? I'm sitting in this room telling you about a wonderful experience I had with Comcast.
Did you keep your Comcast service? Or?
Oh yeah, and I have my Comcast. And I actually bought, although I did return a box, I have a box still, and I did take one of their other services. And it's been a great experience. And I've had more people tell me, I'm floored by that. I said, yeah. So it's, the experience stores and that connectivity to your customer is truly important. And what are you delivering them in a relationship?
And I think just one of the sort of general observation is as the world gets more digitized and everything gets more connected and data becomes so prevalent, it almost becomes a data shadow over every physical thing, the value of human connection rises. So
Absolutely.
you see that's why in the music
Agreed.
industry, for example, the value literally has shifted to the physical concerts and the merch, because that has more of an emotional connection, and there you can monetize around that. So it feels to me like you could probably be as general as splitting the brands or the companies in the world into 2 camps. The ones who think that they need to kind of do digital as it's still an addendum to what their core sort of being is. And the ones that genuinely are digital, obviously the digital first companies like the Ubers and the Amazons, but even non-digital companies by birth who believe that digital and data-driven services is the anchor channel and that they need to build around that. I think companies who believe that will transition successfully. Companies who still see it as another channel to be managed and coordinated, I think it's the wrong starting point.
A couple of things as we run down. I think we've got about 10 minutes left in time. When we founded Fashion Tech Forum, one of the reasons we founded it is we said, and you just proved it, thank you, Anne-Marie, that the tech sector was going to dominate in retail. That eventually, if the fashion sector, the luxury sector, did not begin to understand this threat, that they would dominate. You also made a prediction at, I guess, I don't remember the conference, but I did discuss this with you, that in about 25 years, we would go from having 1,000 malls to 300. Mm-hmm. So I would like everyone here to weigh in on who will be the winners and who will be the losers in retail, number one. And if you could have predicted, and you 2 people here in the center, or maybe 3 of you are certainly predictors, the failure of one major retailer that doesn't exist anymore. So starting with you, Emery.
I was going to say, well, I'd love to say Sears, you know, because we were picking on that earlier, but they just don't go away. It's really remarkable, and we should do, I'd love to see a university case study, business class study on how they sustain themselves for so long, because I think they've been on the chopping block for, you know, 2 or 3 decades, right?
I recently wrote a piece in Forbes. It's the longest liquidation sale in history. Sears.
It's like it just doesn't end. So who won't be around? You know, I think I am going to pick on Macy's because I think, and department stores, it's very challenged. I'll pick on Macy's. I don't think Nordstrom is going to necessarily go away, but I think department stores want to just kind of look at a category. Because the service has changed. You have to understand who you are as a brand, right? I've talked to many people around Nordstrom, for example, and their service has significantly altered in who they are, you know, around product knowledge and the service levels that you get. You know, Macy's, I'll pick on their One Below, which was really great kind of idea. One Below is in the basement level, the Herald Square location, and it was targeted at millennials and putting all your products together. You know, and looking at servicing the millennial generation specifically was the objective of that project, but one of the significant pieces of that, so they had some digital signage and things of that nature, different things, some interactive screens, but really but nothing had really changed in really who they were. And one of the significant pieces was the idea is, you know, they wanted to encourage social. You know, millennials are very social, generally social media, those kinds of things, but there was no connectivity. There was no Wi-Fi access. First thing I noticed, no Wi-Fi access. And then I talked to a reporter who was a millennial that interviewed me about this location. We had an offline conversation. I said, well, what did you think when you went there? And she said, the product. Ugh, the product was terrible. So.
Matters.
It matters, right?
Matters.
The product matters. So who's going to be around in 25 years? I think the winners are going to be, I think this is what's going to happen. We are going to have smaller footprints. Brands are going to own their own stores. We're going to have fewer of these kind of large locations. Department stores are going to be significantly impacted unless they can bring those shop-in-shop kind of leased space concepts in. So brands will have, you know, maybe they'll have like a Bonobos or things like that. Zappos opened a store recently here, a pop-up store, so we'll see more pop-ups. We'll see more small footprints. We'll see brands have 10 to 20 stores, maybe 30 in really prominent markets. We're seeing companies like Perch do that, Peloton do that. They'll be very edited and they'll own their own, which is why I think the mall's going to be significantly impacted because brands don't need you anymore, right? What do they need? They can control their message. So that's really what's going to happen. We'll probably have fewer stores, but we'll have more branded stores and more branded experiences on the whole. That's what I see.
Laura?
Oh, goodness. I'll pick on Sears. It kills me. But I do think that, I mean, this week they announced they sold their Craftsman brand. So if anybody missed that headline, that's a 100-year-old brand. Now they've licensed it back into perpetuity, but what does that mean for a company that's selling itself off in bits? And I'm from Chicago. I grew up with Sears. We have a home that's a Sears kit home. They used to sell them by mail order, and they were put together. I live in a Sears kit bungalow, and I live on Kenmore Avenue. I'm not making this up. Like, this kills me. So it's depressing in that way, but it's reminiscent of a company that you could see. You asked which one, you know, looking back, and you see them as they went to their own death. Circuit City, for those of you who've come to CES over the years, you know, they were the powerhouse when I first started covering this segment of retail. And they were and Best Buy took them down swiftly and quickly. And they seemed to never see it coming. And they insisted till the bitter end, to me on record, we think we have the best model for selling consumer electronics. And the customers will come to us for that.
Jeremy.
I guess I'd like to offer just a little bit of a counterpoint to the dissolution of malls and department stores. I think that these guys, you know, Macy's decoupled the brand from their real estate holdings, as we all know, and we know HBC and the Saks and Hudson Bay brands are doing that as well, and I think they're going to refactor and rethink those stores. I hope that they do. Apple just moved in. to the Macy's flagship, and they're going to look at more different models for their square footage, that flexible square foot, like you were saying, the pop-up, the idea that maybe they could set up a flexible marketplace and pop up different regional e-com players in each one of those spaces and supply cafe and hospitality experiences and then cycle people in and out at 12, 24, 36-month leases rather than 5, 10, 15-year leases. I think that it's a lot more dynamic. The winners are consolidating their infrastructure. They're going to own their customer. They're going to have their inventory all aligned, so you're going to be able to pop up shopping experiences anywhere and everywhere. Also, just another quick counterpoint, as we, as Amazon, which, you can't go through one of these things without just really sticking on them so much, consolidates, commoditizes. They're just not going to be able to own the top end of the market. There is an emotionality, emotional sort of connection with brands that can disintermediate and really break that. There's certain experiences and there's certain brands that will still break that wide open. Will still, Amazon owns certain behaviors. They own, they own this like immediacy. They own this like, click, like this simple purchase cycle as we're seeing with Alexa. I mean, think about the behavioral change that's happening in your living room right now with an Alexa. As I looked at automotive, which I just love the traffic patterns of people, because that, malls and retail has looked at that over the years. How many people are going in and out of my doors? Now we have to look at this entire retail landscape and look at this entire, the traffic patterns across many different places. You look at these cars, as cars become more autonomous, are these turning into your new living rooms? Are these new purchasing experiences? So, the square footage model is broken, and we'll see who's gonna respond well to this stuff. But the brand can still break some of this stuff open. At least I have a lot of hope that it does, and it can. And and I mean, Amazon, we'll see how it grows, but it's gonna certainly grow and own that lower half, not that lower half of the market, but the more commoditized elements of the market. I mean, even the garment that Andy has over here, described this beautiful garment by this great designer, but it has an exclusivity around it. So the behavior that it is encouraging, people are owning it because it creates exclusivity. I mean, that's something special. That's not something that Amazon can own.
And just lastly, to bring it all back to wearables, and we'll start with Laura. It's incredible, all the products that are here, and so many wearables available. Do we have our picture? Laura's?
I off my phone.
Oh,
I didn't
darn.
Put it up here.
Anyway, tell us your favorite wearable.
Downstairs in the stands is a man wearing his undies. And they are a wearable, and they protect the goods from radiation from the phones that men wear in their front pockets. Amazing. And it's a brave soul down there. He's not a model. He is, I think, an engineer. And I thought, okay, I give him props. That was my favorite thing I saw.
I love it. And Andy, your favorite wearable?
Obviously, the Rochambeau bright bomber jacket, because what could be more wearable than a jacket?
And I think it would really look good with the undies.
Yeah, exactly.
Indeed.
It is the combination, the ecosystem of combining kind of underwear with jackets is a.
And quickly, Emery, your favorite?
I thought this was really interesting. It had true utility in the smog mask, so it detects, when there's toxins in the air, whatever, triggers you, indicates it's when it's time to put on the mask for people who are concerned about that. And there's many cities that are concerned about pollution and toxicity. I thought that was really interesting.
And Jeremy?
I love Andy's jacket. I really do. I mean, I think the brand and the functionality are a perfect match. It's an exclusive, fabulous designer, and it's got an exclusive, fabulous function. Very cool.
Thank you very much.
You have all been so fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you.